and said you can take the Jew out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the Jew. And then you have Malik Ali, who used to come every year. He is an imam from Oakland. He is a rabid anti-Semite. He won't deny it. He calls people Zionist Jews and so on and so forth. There is a problem of anti-Semitism at UCI. And the people that I blame for it have been the leadership, not all, the leadership, the politically active leadership of the Muslim Student Union, and particularly Students for Justice in Palestine. They resort to tactics of intimidation and bullying, and this goes on across the nation because I follow it very closely. I would like you to address that since you did go to UCI. You can refute me if you like.
Did you hear about the incident with 4 IDF soldiers in the past month coming to UCI?
I was there.
You were there?
I witnessed it.
And those individuals intimidating the Muslim community?
I did not see any intimidation on their part.
Okay, so I think it's...
I wasn't there every day, but for the times I was there, I didn't see
from
it.
those 2 individuals, one of them I'm familiar with, and I don't think the Muslim community would stand for that. The other I'm not, so I can't speak to it. But statements that are anti-Semitic, we would be against, and again, we would not support. I can't, again, speak to those 2 issues in detail without going back and looking at my notes and seeing what work we did, what kind of statements we released in response. But they also seem to be from 2001, which is way before my time at UCI. So I don't have any personal knowledge of that either. I would just say that from what I've seen, and I've gone to a lot of the events with individuals coming and talking about both sides. There has been a lot of issues of posters being put up associating MSA members, Muslim Student Association members, with terrorists. There's an organization called
Freedom Center, that's Horowitz's organization. Right.
Who has done this consistently throughout all the UCs. They'll create a poster, they'll put Anwar al-Awlaki on it, and then they'll put the name of the Muslim Student Association board and say essentially that equating them to him and that they're terrorists. And then you see those Muslim community students being harassed on campus. Again, not being able to study and go about their business like any other student. So I think there are issues, and if there is anti-Semitism, the Muslim community would stand against it, and we can't, again, control every individual and how they act. But I think it stems both ways, and I could probably go through lists of other incidents that have happened, but the expert on this issue and someone that you all can reach out to is Liz Jackson with Palestine Legal. They deal with this day in and day out, and I think she would be much more informed, and I would be more than happy to share her contact information with the organizers, and if you all have her out to come and talk about the issue, because I think that can be an event all on its own, and she would have the expertise and the background to address the issue much better than I would.
Who is she?
She's a lawyer for Palestine Legal, which is an offshoot of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and they deal with a lot of, again, free speech issues on campuses and how MSAs and Students for Justice in Palestine have been had their speech limited and suppressed on campuses across the state. So she, again, deals with these issues on a day-to-day basis, and she would be great on this topic. Go ahead.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm here speaking. You know, I think I'm glad we discussed the definition of Islamophobia and whether you have to say the irrational fear. Because, you know, basically all prejudice, all grouping of people, whether they have the label of Islam, or Muslim, or Jewish, or Christian, or atheist, or whatever it happens to be, it's irrational. Okay, you're judging hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people in one mindset, and that's just not human nature, and we know it from our own families. Okay, in my family, we're not all the same. I have an identical twin brother. I have an identical twin son. Okay, you can't get more focused on identity than in my immediate family, and we have strong disbeliefs and different characteristics. So to judge a set of identical twins, or my sons, or my twin brother, and myself, it's irrational. And so let's just get an understanding about this sort of thinking of groups as being of one mindset is irrational by definition. That's one principle I think is should be obvious from a scientific point of view. And the other thing is, we do have, I don't feel I have to justify or explain every time some Jewish settler type is saying something crazy. My obligation is to, obviously, I have different points of view about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and I express those. But I can't be monitoring every statement on the internet, and if somebody points the finger, hey, Joe, you didn't comment about this crazy Jewish settler type that was saying all these horrible things. So I think we have to have a little bit better understanding of what is being active for basically human rights, and this is the heart of what you're talking about, the heart of dealing with Islamophobia, the heart of what this organization is all about, is about human rights, freedom of conscience, and opposed to state religion or any aspect of state religion. And as Muslim or a Jew, we tend to be a little bit more hypersensitive because we're such a small portion of the American population. But my guess is people that are openly atheists are also a relatively small portion in terms of there may be a large number, but they're not open about their core beliefs about how they interpret the universe. So I'm saying all this because I want to reinforce what you do, and also that the sense that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, they are completely different. My grandparents were anti-Zionists. Okay, we're talking about before the state of Israel in the early 1900s. There were lots of Jews. They were working class Jews. They were from Poland. They were from Russia. They were part of the Tsarist Empire. They were not sympathetic with Zionism as a political philosophy. So they disagreed with it. They said, no, we're part of the larger working class. We're part of the country we live in. We've got Christians. We've got others. So I'm trying to reinforce what your point of view is and to let other people know that words count. Individuals have their own right to speak on their own behalf and not to prejudge the group.
No, and I really do appreciate that. I think one of the byproducts of Islamophobia really is anytime that some Muslim or someone who claims to be Muslim says something, then the other 1.6 billion people have to explain, like, why did they do that? And it gets exhausting. But yeah, no, I really do appreciate that. And I think that's one thing that we don't see really happening with a lot of other communities. We do see it a lot of times with the African American community where some kind of law enforcement issue occurs, and it's like, oh, why isn't the black community talking about that? And again, it stems back to systematic racism and oppression. So thank you. I think there was another question that I might have.
It kind of goes on the lines of the last couple of questions. One thing is, I'm sort of phrase it coherently. One thing is, having to answer, as if, you represent some either violent or even just verbal extremist. But the other thing is responsibility. If somebody who claims to be of a progressive, point engages in violent behavior, it's not my fault, but I still have to speak out against it. So I think part of what this gentleman's question is, in speaking out against, oppressive behavior against the Muslim community, I think there's also maybe a little bit of a responsibility to counter some of the, the undemocratic attitude, anti-Semitic attitudes on some of these groups that were talked about earlier. Is CARE engaging in any kind of public conversation to counter some of this anti-Semitism, which unfortunately is present in U.S. and particularly in Europe. You're seeing a lot of Jews leaving France, because of increased anti-Semitic violent attacks. Some of which are, Le Pen fascists, but very many of them, are perpetrated by Muslims. So what is your activity to counter this kind of behavior? Which I think, is part of what you're doing.
So one thing to say again, what we do and what we try to make an intentional effort about at CARE is not being so defensive and having to feel that we have to respond to everything. But in our line of work as a civil rights organization, one of the cases that we worked on last year was a Jewish student at a university who had a holiday and could not come and take his exam. We took that case on because it's a case that civil liberties issue because of someone's faith falls exactly within the scope of our work. And we helped that student and we got him an alternative test date. Another issue that we saw at the beginning of, I don't know if it was in November or in early January, but when all those Jewish cemeteries were being ransacked. Again, our national office as well as CARE Los Angeles came out and issued statements saying that these actions were hate crimes, they're anti-American, and that's the kind of work we do as a civil liberties organization. But again, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that if we wanted to spend all our time responding to what X did or what Y did, we'd just respond all the time and we wouldn't be moving an agenda forward that stands for civil liberties for all Americans, Muslim and non-Muslim, and individuals who are being discriminated against. And another case that we're working on, which kind of shows the diversity of cases that we have in communities that we represent, is Arab Coptic Christian who faced some police brutality and some other issues that impacted him and his family. Again, that's an issue that CARE takes, and we might not come and amplify it in the media or in the news, even if it might make us look better, because that's, again, we're not trying to impress anyone. We're working for the civil liberties of all Americans, and in doing that, we represent the Muslim community 90% of the time. And when we don't, but it's a good cause and it's a righteous action, we're going to go ahead and do that. And that's kind of what our organization has been doing for the last 22 years.
I don't hear your responses answering the questions of these two gentlemen, which is what we have seen as a fairly overt anti-Semitism on campuses.
I think my response is, if there is anti-Semitism on campuses, we would, as a civil liberties organization, stand against it. At the same time, there is anti-Islamic and anti-Muslim sentiment on a lot of campuses, if not to a greater extent. And then the last point is, the line of questioning, like the gentleman in the back said, is a part of how the Muslim community has had to face Islamophobia in a very practical manner. I don't think any other community or group would have to come up here and answer, okay, this specific incident or that specific incident, what is your response, what have you been doing, when we have a track record of working for the civil liberties of all Americans. So I don't want to feed into that narrative and that defensive narrative, so which is why I talk about the issues, I talk about me as an individual, what our belief is and what our organization stands for, but other than that, me giving any kind of response is feeding into that narrative.
Okay.
I think that religion in general is the source of most of evil in the world.
Thank you.
And with the current administration now selling out to religious right, I'm calling it the American Taliban, because now we're going back to the Middle Ages if they succeed. Women's rights, religious control of your lives, anti-science,
I'm not sure that was your question.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that happening? And
Do I see religion being?
I mean, what's going to happen when these wacko Christians take over our lives to, the majority extent? What's going to happen from your perspective in the Muslim world?
I honestly don't have a fear of wacko Christians taking over, whether it's this government or the world. I would just say it's really important if people who are standing for democracy and for liberty keep otherizing other communities and groups, whatever their faith or religion is, then that's what's going to enable this administration to do all the wacko stuff that it does. Because President Trump did a great job of is calculating how many votes do I need to get elected, and what kind of hate can I spew to get those individuals to show up for me. And I think it's counterproductive for us to engage in that same action. I think working in coalitions, despite what your personal beliefs are, to advance the Constitution, to advance democracy is what we need to be engaged with in, and that's what we do as an organization, and that's what I would highly recommend. I'm going to go that way and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
So Americans United for Separation of Church and State has done a lot of work in fighting the Muslim ban and being a partner with CARE on a national level, and yet I never see anyone from the Muslim community joining with us here. And I think that if people started participating with groups like ours, there wouldn't be these, you know, repeated questions of why don't you stand up for this or that or the other things, because the consensus is that the Muslim community is alien to us, and we don't understand why there is a reluctance to participate with our organization, which has been so supportive of the Muslim community.
So my response to that would be twofold. First of all, thank you for inviting me today, and thank you for having Hassan previously. But I don't know why the burden would fall on the Muslim community to come interact with you all. If you invite us, we will come.
But you don't. I mean, the speakers come, but nobody else comes.
And there's a couple of, I don't know who you've invited and how you've engaged with them, but I think that expectation, again, to have 1% of the population, if that 1% had to go out and do outreach to the other 99%, I'm not sure, again, what they would do in their professional lives and how they feed their families and what else that they're going to do. I think there's a willingness and engagement with different organizations, different mosques. They have open mosque days where you don't have to come and learn about the religion, but you can come and meet a Muslim. There's events that we host that have coffee with a Muslim. And
I guess my point is that many of us have gone to Open Mosque Day, but we don't see any reciprocal attendance. That is my concern.
okay.
That's your
I think it
invitation.
really depends on what group, because in groups that I've been involved with, there are Muslims. I think it's a question of, and also, I mean, there's no question at the door what religion you belong to, if any, when you come in. So I don't know that we can say, you know, 100% nobody who's a member of AU is a Muslim.
And again, going back to it, it's, I can't speak to how one person or one mosque or whatever interacts with you all. I know I care. Well, the biggest issue we have is capacity. We have currently 17 staff trying to deal with issues that are impacting 500,000 Muslims in Southern California. We can't even get to all the issues that the Muslim community thinks is important.
I'm not talking about here.
No, I know. And I want to say again, with other mosques, it's going to be the same thing. If you have a congregation that needs X, Y, and Z done, you always are going to put their needs, because they're your constituents, they're who you answer to directly, and there is a desire to do other things. And I hope we have the ability to do that more and more of that as time goes by. There is a lot of great work that's being done. I can, again, provide names of organizations and try to be more helpful in facilitating that, but I think that's all I can do.
I would just like to say I do a lot of, my husband and I do a lot of political work here in Irvine. We live in Irvine. We support candidates, etc. And whenever we have had an event, we invite the Muslim community, and they come in groups. And it's been not a problem because we continue to reach out to them. And I'm so glad to have you here. I love listening to what you're saying. And I just think it's each individual's responsibility to take a Muslim to lunch. I mean, I don't know.
Wait until after Ramadan.
Not Ramadan, but after January.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was curious, like, obviously there's a difference between Muslim Americans and Arab Americans. And, like, the Israeli conflict is not always necessarily, the problem isn't with, you know, the Jews and the Muslims. It can sometimes be the people that were from that area that don't identify as Muslim as well. So I was just curious, do you you also work with